Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Gao Wu. I went crazy with the animation system. Chapter 41. At this time, Li Hanfang had returned home. He carefully looked at every corner of the house and made sure that no one had broken into the place before he let out a breath. He dragged his tired body into the bathroom, rinsed his body with cold water, returned to the room, treated several wounds on his body, and then wrapped them in gauze. After doing all this, Li Hanfang took a deep breath, then took out some spiritual stones and placed them beside him. He still held two pieces in his hand, sat cross-legged on the ground, and began to practice with his eyes closed. Using the breathing method, the spiritual energy visible to the naked eye was drawn out, poured into Li Hanfang's body, and then slowly flowed through the meridians to the dantian. The spiritual energy vortex at this time has changed significantly compared to a month ago. Not only is the volume more than twice as large, but the spiritual energy is so rich that it has turned into some water droplets. When the spiritual energy in the spiritual vortex completely turns into water droplets, a spiritual sea will be formed. This is the biggest difference between low-level extraordinary and mid-level extraordinary. After the cyclone turns into the sea, neither the quality nor the quantity of the spiritual energy can be compared to the spiritual vortex, so it is said that there is a gap between low-level extraordinary and mid-level extraordinary. But this is a very resource and time-consuming process. If the resources are sufficient, it's okay. If there is a lack of spiritual stones and other cultivation items, then this threshold can block a person for several years. At this time, 1/3 of Li Hanfang's spiritual energy vortex had turned into water droplets. This was also due to the terrifying speed of his breathing method in absorbing spiritual energy. Otherwise, how could he have been so fast without the lack of spiritual stones? Progress. According to the current progress, if there are enough spirit stones, it will probably take more than half a month, or a month, to break through to the 4th level. While recovering his spiritual energy, Li Hanfang estimated the time it would take for the cyclone to turn into the sea, and sighed after feeling it. It seems that it is still difficult to break through the 4th level before the college entrance examination. I wonder if any of those geniuses from aristocratic families will have already broken through the 4th level. Although Li Hanfang is very confident in his cultivation speed, he lacks cultivation resources, so it is hard to say whether his progress can catch up with those geniuses. But soon Li Hanfang gave up his distracting thoughts, stopped thinking about these things, and concentrated on practicing. 2 hours later, Li Hanfang opened his eyes because he found that the 10 spiritual stones placed on the ground had been sucked out. Now I can consume 5 spirit stones in 1 hour. It seems that the number of spirit stones needed for cultivation will increase exponentially in the future. Li Hanfang's idea was correct. After the cyclone turned into the sea, a large amount of spiritual energy would be needed to fill each step forward, and the number of spiritual stones needed would naturally double. Li Hanfang exhaled a breath of turbid air, got up and lay on the bed. In cultivation, work and rest must be combined. He hadn't had a good night's sleep in a month. He had to be careful when sleeping in the misty forest for fear of being touched by monsters in the middle of the night, so he was basically half asleep and half awake. As soon as he lay on his bed, he felt that his tense nerves suddenly relaxed. He habitually took out the Naruto manga and prepared to read it for a while before going to bed. But as soon as he took out the comic, he was stunned, and the expression on his face gradually changed from dullness to ecstasy. He jumped up from the bed, still muttering, "Why did I forget that training cheat device?" Li Hanfang immediately thought, and the system panel appeared in front of him. He glanced at the kill value, which was 1065 points. Phew. Li Hanfang exhaled and was very grateful for the killing points sent by those people tonight. What a good person. Click on the ability mall and directly find the shadow clone technique, which is worth 1000 kill points, and win it directly. Suddenly a stream of information poured into his mind, and Li Hanfang closed his eyes to absorb it. Not long after, Li Hanfang opened his eyes and formed seals with his hands at the same time. Shadow clone technique. Bang. As a puff of white smoke dissipated, 2 figures who looked exactly like Li Hanfang suddenly appeared in the room. The 3 of them looked at each other with smiles on their faces, and then Li Hanfang spoke. "Then let's practice as planned." "Okay." After the 2 clones responded, they both sat cross-legged on the ground and began to perform breathing techniques. Li Hanfang, on the other hand, directly placed 50 spiritual stones on the ground for him to practice, and then lay back on the bed and began to think. The limit of the shadow clone technique that can be used now is to create 2 clones. It is enough for now. I can't afford any more. The shadow clone has consciousness independent of the caster's body and a certain ability to resist attacks. After being released, the clone's memory and experience will return to the body. In other words, although these 2 shadow clones share Li Hanfang's spiritual energy equally, the spiritual energy they cultivated will return to the original body by dispelling the clones. Of course, returning to the original body is accompanied by physical and mental fatigue, but this is equivalent to doubling Li Hanfang's cultivation speed. In this case, I should be able to break through the 4th level before the college entrance examination. June 15th is the college entrance examination day. I hope to find out who wants to kill me before then. Thinking of this, Li Hanfang frowned, and after thinking for a while, he began to analyze again. The only person I've offended so far is Zhou Xian, so I'm going to school tomorrow to inquire about the situation and see if it's possible that it's someone from his family. And there was such a big movement last night that it must have alarmed many people. Maybe someone knows the identities of those figures. But even if someone knows, it should be a powerful person in the base city. With my current connections, who should I ask for information? At this point in his thoughts, figures still appeared in Li Hanfang's mind, and then he eliminated them one by one, and his brows furrowed deeply. Suddenly, he thought of the abnormal strength of those people. The strength of this group of people was obviously weaker than the normal ones of the same level, and they didn't even have innate moves. Not to mention the talent moves, Li Hanfang was not sure whether their concealment ability was a talent. This group of people always made him feel like they were mass-produced, with exactly the same abilities, fighting styles, clothing, etc. If it is really man-made, then the most likely force with this ability is Kewu Tower. As soon as he thought of this, a beautiful image suddenly appeared in Li Hanfang's mind, his eyes lit up slightly, and he began to make arrangements for tomorrow's investigation. First, go to the school to inquire about Zhou Xian's recent situation and see if there is anything unusual about him recently. Then he went to Lingbao Pavilion to find Deacon Hao to find out what happened last night. With his status, he should know some inside information. The last step is to find someone to confirm whether Kewu Building has the ability to create talents. After thinking about this, Li Hanfang began to slowly close his eyes, enjoying the peaceful sleep after a month. Early the next morning, Li Hanfang walked out of the room stretching and yawning. He had not slept so soundly for a long time. Especially in the second half of the night, when the 2 clones were released, the instant fatigue made Li Hanfang snore rarely. He carefully sensed the spiritual energy in his body, and his sleepy eyes shone slightly. As expected, feeling the increase in spiritual energy in his body, Li Hanfang put it into his stomach with a hanging heart. At first, he was afraid that it would not be effective. After Li Hanfang simply washed up, he started to take out some monster meat from the system space. He had armored rhinoceros steak for breakfast today. I don't know why, but after spending a day with Murong Qingying, he started to like to store some monster meat. He even ate greasy beast meat in the morning. How strange. By the time Li Hanfang finished eating his steak while reading comics, the time came to 7:10, and it was time to go back to school. After Li Hanfang changed his clothes, he clenched his fists and felt the condition of his body. This was a habit he had developed in the misty forest. He would check the condition of his body every time he went out to prevent any accidents. Feeling the power filling his body, he had a thought and his personal panel appeared in his sight. Personal panel. Race. Human. Age. 17. Talents. Breath of Thunder, Magatama Sharingan. Level. Extraordinary Level 3. Skills. Breath of Thunder, Type 1, Thunderbolt Flash, Breath of Thunder, Type 2, Rice Soul, Breath of Thunder, Type 3, Gathering Mosquitoes into Thunder, Shadow Clone Technique, Fire Escape, Fireball Technique, Substitution. Task. None. This substitute technique is the backup technique mentioned last night, but it's a pity that it was not used. The most practical substitute technique among the 3 techniques in Naruto only costs 100 kills, which is very cost-effective. Simply put, the principle of Avatar is to swap places with something nearby, and then turn that thing into your appearance to confuse the enemy or avoid critical damage. It is also a very buggy ability in the early stages of Naruto's life. It can turn the tide of the battle at critical moments. After checking and confirming that there was nothing wrong, Li Hanfeng walked out of the house. As soon as I walked out of the apartment door, I heard a long-lost obscene voice. Damn it, what the hell is this? Li Hanfeng's head was immediately covered with black lines, and he continued to move forward while looking at the comics without looking back. Snapped. After a while, Li Hanfeng's shoulder was slapped hard by a big hand like a cattail leaf fan, making a crisp sound. Here you go, it's you who is the madman. I thought your dead ghost came back and wandered around here. Even though he said this, he couldn't hide the smile and surprise on the other person's face. Li Hanfeng frowned, not that he was angry, but this guy was very strong. He slapped his wound directly, and he felt that the wound was bleeding. He turned around and looked at the burly figure, and said angrily, "Damn fat man, when have you ever seen a ghost wandering around early in the morning?" As he spoke, he pretended to slap down Cao Yumeng's big hand in disgust. His face remained calm and showed nothing strange. "Good boy, when did you come back? I knew you went to the Misty Forest and didn't come back for so long, but it worried me so much that I didn't even dare to tell my parents. They asked you to come to my house for dinner several times, but I always used other words. Just an excuse to deceive you." Li Hanfeng only used a communicator to send a message to two people about this matter. One was Cao Yumeng and the other was Laoban. "You have to report it. If something happens to you, no one will know where you died. This makes people worry for nothing." Hearing Cao Yumeng's words, Li Hanfeng felt warm in his heart. There are still people in this world who care about him. He immediately smiled and said, "I just came back yesterday, don't worry, nothing will happen." After a pause, Li Hanfeng said again, "Fat man, let me ask you something. Think carefully before you answer." Cao Yumeng saw that Li Hanfeng's expression was rare and serious, and he quickly responded, "Okay, madman, just ask. Let's go, let's talk while walking." Soon, the two of them walked into the school. Li Hanfeng was a little surprised when he saw the changed campus, and then he realized it. After all, the college entrance examination was approaching, and he had almost forgotten the nervousness of the college entrance examination in his previous life. "I saw all kinds of banners full of chicken soup hanging on the campus, which really reminded me of the college entrance examination in my previous life." Li Hanfeng glanced at a few of them casually and sighed in his heart, they were still so classic. Traveling thousands of miles, why fear the east, west, north and south winds? Every second counts. Never back down. Go all out and win the college entrance examination. Hard work will pay off. Hard work will bring results. The world is uncertain, you and I are both dark horses. ... Li Hanfeng and the two passed under these banners and went straight to the classroom. On the way, Li Hanfeng had already learned what he wanted to know through Cao Yumeng. Only after Li Hanfeng beat Zhou Xian that day, the other party did not come to school. Cao Yumeng recalled that the other party should have returned to school half a year ago. So Li Hanfeng asked to see if the other person came to school today. If not, then there was really a lot of suspicion. Wasn't it clear that he was avoiding him? After Li Hanfeng returned to the classroom, many people looked at him in surprise. This genius who had awakened his S-level talent had not come to school for a month. It was said that he had taken a long leave. "Why did you come back suddenly today?" Everyone's eyes fell on Li Hanfeng, with admiration, jealousy, and indifference in their eyes. Li Hanfeng, on the other hand, returned to his seat as if nothing had happened, waiting for the school bell to ring. Ding ding ding. As a somewhat harsh bell rang, Li Hanfeng walked out of the classroom and walked towards Class 2 in front of everyone's surprised eyes. Arriving at the door of Class 2's classroom, Li Hanfeng paused slightly and glanced over every student. He didn't find Zhou Xian, and Li Hanfeng's eyes suddenly narrowed. "Classmate, which class are you in?" Just when Li Hanfeng was about to turn around and leave, a female voice came from beside him. Li Hanfeng turned around and saw that the person coming was a mature woman in her 30s. He knew this person. She was the head teacher of Class 2, Guo Bixian. Li Hanfeng immediately smiled and said, "Hello, Teacher Guo, I am Li Hanfeng from Class 1. I want to see classmate Zhou Xian for something, but I don't see him. Didn't he come to class today?" A look of surprise appeared on Guo Bixian's face. She had naturally heard of Li Hanfeng's name, and she replied with a smile. Oh, it turns out you're looking for Zhou Xian. He asked for leave last night and said he had arranged special training at home to prepare for the college entrance examination. Do you have anything to do with him? Li Hanfeng narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. It's so unfortunate, but it's nothing serious. In this case, I'll go back to class first. Goodbye, teacher. After saying hello to Guo Bixian, Li Hanfeng left. But the moment he turned around, the smile on his face turned cold and he whispered in his heart. Zhou Xian, is it really such a coincidence? Or, is it you? Li Hanfeng, who had already turned to leave, did not notice that after he left, a male classmate sitting in the back row of class 2 immediately took out his communication device and sent a message. This person is Wang Dingshan. Inside the reception room of Lingbao Pavilion. At this time, Li Hanfeng and Deacon Hao were sitting opposite each other, drinking tea and chatting happily. After Li Hanfeng learned that Zhou Xian asked for leave and did not go to school, he was basically sure that the power of Zhou Xian's family wanted his life, so he did not go back to class, but came to Lingbao Pavilion to find out the news. Deacon Hao, I heard that something big happened on the suburban street last night, and many people died. After Li Hanfeng took a sip of tea, he pretended to be casual and tried. When Butler Hao heard this, a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. News about this matter had been blocked. He didn't expect that Li Hanfeng would actually know about it, and it seemed that he came here specifically to ask about it. Oh, I wonder how Brother Han Feng got the news. Li Hanfeng raised his head and glanced at Deacon Hao, smiled and said. There was a lot of noise at the time, and my house happened to be nearby, so I saw someone fighting over there from a distance. After a pause, Li Hanfeng continued. It seems that someone has been assassinated. I am worried that I will also be in danger, so I came to see Deacon Hao today to find out the situation. As soon as these words came out, Deacon Hao was stunned. What do you mean? Someone is assassinated, will you be in danger? Suddenly his pupils shrank suddenly and he looked at Li Hanfeng with a horrified expression. Li Hanfeng didn't seem to notice the change in Deacon Hao's face. After taking a sip of tea, he still looked at Deacon Hao with a smile on his face, as if waiting for the other party's answer. After seeing Li Hanfeng's expression, Deacon Hao had basically confirmed his suspicion. He suppressed the turmoil in his heart and kept his voice calm. Well, there was indeed a battle there last night, and more than 10 people died. After hearing this, Li Hanfeng thought for a moment and asked. What level are the dead people and what kind of talents do they have? In the last sentence, Li Hanfeng's tone seemed somewhat meaningful. Deacon Hao, a veteran who often interacts with people, naturally understood it. He immediately knew what Li Hanfeng really wanted to ask. Deacon Hao took a sip of tea and frowned slightly, as if he was thinking about something and seemed a little embarrassed. Li Hanfeng didn't speak to urge him, he just drank tea calmly and waited for the other party's answer. Phew. After a long silence, Deacon Hao exhaled, took another sip of tea, and then said in a deep voice. Kewu Building has a very powerful research result that can copy talents to other people, so that ordinary people, or people without fighting talents, can have combat power. But these people who copy other people's talents are flawed. They can never understand the talent moves and can only use the most basic talent abilities, so they are much weaker than the average person at the same level. This research result and these people are called Tian Fu Jie. After saying this, Deacon Hao did not speak again, but looked at Li Hanfeng and drank the tea in his hand. Li Hanfeng's pupils trembled when he heard this. Although he had made such a guess, he was still shocked after the guess was confirmed. It must be crazy to know that even if there are certain flaws, an ordinary person can be turned into an extraordinary person. But Li Hanfeng knew that this must come at a high price. Otherwise, the country would have been popularized long ago and implemented the policy of using all soldiers as soldiers, and it would not be so peaceful. Heavenly Resurrectionist. After Li Hanfeng murmured, he immediately determined one thing. The person who wanted to kill him must have something to do with Kewu Tower. Or simply someone with a certain status in the Kewu building. Li Hanfeng pondered for a moment and then asked, Brother Hao, are there any management personnel named Zhou in the Kewu building in SH Base City? Upon hearing this, Deacon Hao took a deep look at Li Hanfeng, and then said with a meaningful expression. There is a deacon in Kewu building named Zhou Zonghai. As soon as these words came out, Li Hanfeng's smiling eyes suddenly flashed with a cold light, and a faint flash of scarlet could be seen. He has now been able to confirm that this matter must be related to Zhou Xian. Next, he only needs to confirm the relationship between Zhou Xian and Zhou Zonghai, and take action. As for the relationship between them, Li Hanfeng already had an idea in his mind. He instantly calmed down his expression and emotions, regained his smile and took a sip of tea. Instead of asking any more questions on this topic, he chatted with Deacon Hao about other trivial matters. The two of them didn't chat for a few words before Li Hanfeng stood up and left. Brother Hao, thank you for everything today. I have to go to class in the afternoon, so I won't bother you anymore. Deacon Hao also understood what he meant and said with a smile. Hey, brother, you are so polite. How can I say thank you? This is a trivial matter. Since I still have something to do, I won't let you have lunch, haha. Next time, as a younger brother, I will treat you to a good meal. After Li Hanfeng exchanged a few polite words with Deacon Hao, he said there was no need to send it off, and then turned and left. Seeing Li Hanfeng leaving, Deacon Hao's eyes flickered. He had a certain understanding of the situation last night, so he now also had a certain understanding of Li Hanfeng's strength. This person is definitely a monster-level figure, and he deserves to do some offending things for him. Zhou Zonghai, Li Hanfeng went back home directly after leaving Lingbao Pavilion. He wanted to confirm the relationship between Zhou Xian and Zhou Zonghai first, and then make a good plan. He didn't think he could kill the Zhou family alone now. He sat on the guest sofa in the living room, took out his communicator, glanced at the time, and dialed Lao Ban's phone number. Hello, I heard that your kid went back to school today. Why did he disappear again just a while ago? As soon as the call was connected, an unpleasant tone of voice came from the other side. Li Hanfeng could only laugh at this. Aha, Lao Ban, I know you are in a hurry, but don't be anxious yet. I have something I want to ask you about. The old man on the other end of the phone almost choked. What nonsense is this? I knew you had something to do, so you came to me. Tell me, what do you want to know? Li Hanfeng was a little embarrassed when he heard this, but he still forced himself to ask. Old class, what's the name of Zhou Xian's father in class 2? Lao Ban was startled when he heard this. He didn't understand why Li Hanfeng asked this, so he immediately asked. Why are you asking this? You two don't seem to have anything in common, right? Hearing this, it was Li Hanfeng's turn to be a little stunned. He thought this was a bit strange. At that time, he beat Zhou Xian. Many students saw it. How could it not be spread in the school? He looked at teacher Guo Bixian and his old classmate as if they didn't know. He felt a little strange, but he didn't think much about it, but casually said. Oh, I heard that Zhou Xian's family is not simple. I wonder if there is a chance to join him. FKU, Zhou Xian is not from our class. I just heard it from my colleagues. He seemed to be named Zhou. Zhou Hai, I can't remember clearly. Let me ask you. No need, Lao Ban, I suddenly don't want to know anymore. I'm dead and going to practice. Thank you, Lao Ban. Goodbye, Lao Ban. After saying that, he hung up the phone. Lao Ban looked at the communicator in his hand and fell into deep thought. Are you kidding me? Are you too kind to this boy? When he comes back, should we punish him to copy textbooks? Li Hanfeng's expression was calm, but his eyes were filled with chills, extremely cold. Zhou Zonghai, deacon of Kewu building. Li Hanfeng sat on the sofa and meditated for a long time, thinking about how to deal with the other party. The other party was the deacon of Kewu building. He could not directly kill Kewu building. That would be courting death. Not to mention that he doesn't have this strength. Even if he does, he won't kill directly. The Kewu building in the SH base city is just a small branch. The headquarters of Kewu building is the superpower of the Dragon Kingdom. If you go directly to their branch to kill people, will they give you something good to eat? Therefore, this matter must be defined as a personal vendetta, and Kewalo cannot be made to feel that he is deliberately causing trouble for them. He does not want to offend a giant like Kewalo just for Zhou Zonghai. This is not worth it. But the Zhou family must be destroyed, so we have to think of other ways. But is there any way to kill Zhou Zonghai without offending Kewalo? Li Hanfeng thought for a long time but had no suitable idea. Finally, he took out the communicator, looked at a name on it, and pursed his lips. To be honest, he didn't want to ask the other party for help. After all, what happened when they first met really made him feel a little confused. But in the end, he still dialed the communication with some anxiety. Now he can only give it a try, otherwise the matter will have to be shelved temporarily and left to be dealt with later. Toot. After a while, the call was connected, and a clear and pleasant female voice came. Li Hanfeng, you finally came to see me. That surprised me. Li Hanfeng was a little embarrassed. After all, he didn't know the other person very well, and the first time was really not that pleasant. But when he was in the Kewu building, the other party said that he would do him a favor to express his apology. Now that he wants the other party to do this favor, he thinks she won't refuse. Miss Zinran, long time no see. Are you still in SH Base City? I want to invite you out for a drink. Zhang Zinran, who was on the opposite side of the communicator, was startled when he heard this, as if he had not expected that he would send such an invitation, and then a pleasant laughter came. Hee, you want to date me? I'm sorry that I have already returned to the Magic City and can't let you spend money. What a pity. Li Hanfeng sighed in his heart when he heard this. He wanted to ask others for help, but they all left. This time it was a bit difficult. At this time Zhang Zinran's voice came over again. You want my help with something, right? After all, Zhang Zinran was not an ordinary girl. As soon as Li Hanfeng opened her mouth, she knew that the other party wanted to ask for something, but she was a little embarrassed, so she asked first. After all, she did owe the other party an apology, and she meant what she said at that time. When Li Hanfeng heard Zhang Zinran ask this, he didn't hesitate after thinking about it and said immediately. Well, I do want to ask Miss Zinran for help, but you are not here now. Tell me about it first. I don't have to be in your base city to help. Before he finished speaking, Zhang Zinran knew what Li Hanfeng wanted to say and immediately interrupted. Li Hanfeng thought so when he heard this. What if someone could come up with an idea? After all, the other party's identity is unusual. But there is a concern. After all, the other party is from Kewu Building. Will he deal with a deacon of the Kewu Building branch for himself? After thinking about it, Li Hanfeng decided to give it a try first. At least the other party verbally promised him an apology, and even if he didn't help, he wouldn't turn against him. As for the news leaking, it is estimated that the news had already spread back to the Zhou family when he left the door of Class 1 and 2. Well, here's the thing. Li Hanfeng briefly told what happened, and then both of them fell into silence. After a long time, Zhang Zinran spoke. Her voice was very calm and did not reveal any unnecessary emotions. So you want to? When Li Hanfeng heard the other party's question, he didn't mean to hide it and said directly. I am very lazy and don't like trouble, so I usually don't leave trouble. When Zhang Zinran heard this, she immediately understood what Li Hanfeng meant. She wanted to avoid causing trouble for him in the future. But this did make Zhang Zinran hesitate. As Li Hanfeng thought, she was from the Kewu building after all. Now she is asked to help Li Hanfeng deal with the people from the Kewu building. Is this appropriate? But then she made a decision and said with a smile. I can help with this matter, but I have conditions. Hearing this, Li Hanfeng was immediately happy. It would be great if he could help. As for the conditions mentioned by the other party, he thought it was normal. The other party is not his, so it is impossible for the other party to help him unconditionally. If there is no request, he will not agree. Miss Zinran, if you have any conditions, please tell me directly. After Zhang Zinran pondered for a moment, she said with a smile. First, you must occupy the top 10 positions in the national freshman rankings in the college entrance examination. The freshman list is a list that records outstanding candidates across the country. It only records the names of 100 students. Every name here is a target of competition from the college. You can imagine how difficult it is to get into the top 10 among millions of candidates across the country. But Li Hanfeng had no objection to this, and instead spoke calmly. What about the second one? Zhang Zinran heard the confidence in Li Hanfeng's tone, and the smile on his face became much wider. The second thing is that you will come to Mowu to be my junior disciple. Li Hanfeng heard this and thought about it. Mowu Chaoran Academy, one of the 4 academies, had nothing to fault, and immediately nodded in agreement. No problem, what about the 3rd one? Hearing this, Zhang Xinren was startled, and then said with some confusion. Why do you think there is a 3rd one? Li Hanfang was stunned when he heard this, no more. But the other party's conditions don't seem to be very beneficial to the other party. You just want to test your own strength and then do her a favor later? Li Hanfang asked tentatively. No yet. Zhang Xinren on the other end of the communicator smiled playfully and said. Of course, the 3rd thing is that you have to call me Senior Sister Xinren from now on, haha. After a pause, she continued. Don't worry, what I said last time was serious. This time I will treat it as my apology. You can't bring that up again in the future. Li Hanfang also immediately smiled and said. Aha, what are you talking about, Senior Sister Xinren, why can't I understand? Zhang Xinren also smiled sweetly and said. Junior is so sensible. Li Hanfang smiled and asked about business. Haha, then Senior Sister Xinren, how can you help me? Zhang Xinren heard this and said in a very calm voice. Let's put this matter aside for now. When you get into the top 10 of the freshman rankings, you can do whatever you want with him. After a pause, she added. I'm just helping you limit the power of Kewu Tower. Zhou family, you have to deal with it yourself. No one from Kewu Tower will cause trouble for you afterwards. Hearing this, Li Hanfang felt relieved and quickly replied. That's enough. Thank you Senior Sister Xinren for your help. I will do my best if you need it in the future. Zhang Xinren is very satisfied with his self-confidence. He has absolute confidence to enter the top 10 of the freshman list, which shows that he is much stronger now. After the two chatted for a few more words, Li Hanfang ended the communication saying that something happened. Phew, Li Hanfang exhaled. He was mainly afraid that Kewu Tower would fight him to the death for Zhou Zonghai. He didn't want to be like the protagonist in the novel, killing one by one and killing all the way to the strongest. He just wants to kill aliens, kill monsters, upgrade monsters along the way, and kill through other worlds. Mowu Extraordinary Academy, an exclusive training room. A beautiful figure looked at the communicator that had been hung up in her hand. The smile on her face gradually began to turn cold, and a cold light flashed in her beautiful eyes. Zhou Zonghai. It is true that she is from Kewu Building, and her status is even very special. Logically speaking, she should not help outsiders deal with the deacons of the Kewu Building branch. But, when Kewu Building was founded, the purpose was to provide humans with more choices through the combination of science and transcendence, so that humans can develop better in this troubled world. At that time, it was also because of the strong support of the state that Kewu Building developed so rapidly. And now this week, Zhou Zonghai actually used the power of the Kewu Building to eradicate a talented young man because of a small friction between the juniors. In her mind, this went against the founding philosophy of Kewu Building, so Zhou Zonghai was no longer one of her own. Even without Li Hanfang, if she found out about this matter, she would still pull Zhou Zonghai down and would not let him stay in this position. What's more, now that Li Hanfang has taken the initiative to speak, she can treat it as a smooth favor and sell it to him. However, Li Hanfang still has to show a certain value. She really needed Li Hanfang to do her a favor, but not everyone could help her. After reading this, a faint smile appeared on her face, which was touching. Senior brother Han Feng, senior sister is optimistic about you. Then she picked up the communicator and dialed a number. At this time, Li Hanfang was still thinking deeply with his eyebrows lowered, and his eyes flickered occasionally, wondering what he was thinking. Phew. After a long time, Li Hanfang took a long breath, and then his eyes turned into his usual lazy and casual look. In that case, let's wait until the college entrance examination is over. There shouldn't be any problems during this period, right? Li Hanfang thought about it and felt that the Zhou family would not come to cause trouble during this period. After all, Zhang Xinren had promised him that everything would be resolved after the college entrance examination. So during the period before the college entrance examination, the Zhou family should be warned and asked to calm down. After thinking about this, Li Hanfang felt relieved, and then began to quickly form seals with his hands. Shadow Clone Technique. Bang! As the white mist dissipated, 2 shadow clones appeared in the living room, and Li Hanfang nodded towards them. Today is the 3rd, so let's practice with all our strength in the next 10 days or so. The two clones nodded, then walked directly back to the room and began to sit cross-legged, while the main body took out nearly 100 spiritual stones and placed them on the ground for them to practice. Then the three Li Hanfangs all started to use their breathing techniques. In an instant, spiritual energy surged wildly, and all nearby spiritual energy was drained. In a mansion on the outskirts of the base city. At this time, Zhou Xian was pacing back and forth in the room, his face a little pale and ugly, and he looked uneasy. Li Hanfang went to find me directly after he came back. He must have started to doubt me. What should I do? What should I do now? My father hasn't come back yet, what should I do? He is so strong now that even the shadow guards can't do anything to him. Damn it, how could he be so strong? When Lu Dingshan sent him a message in the morning and told him that Li Hanfang came to look for him, he was so shocked that he broke into a cold sweat. Fortunately, his father asked him to take leave and stay at home, otherwise he would definitely not be able to eat and walk around. He wanted to tell Zhou Zonghai, but Zhou Zonghai was working in the Kewu building, so he couldn't tell him, and he couldn't use a communicator to tell him. This was Zhou Zonghai's rule. So he has been feeling uneasy until now. He can't go out and can't vent his emotions, which puts him under a lot of mental pressure. Boom, boom, boom. Who? This sudden knock on the door startled Zhou Xian. Under the huge mental pressure, he was forced back several steps by the knock on the door of his room. This is my young master. The master of the family asked you to come over. As soon as this old voice appeared, Zhou Xian seemed to have grabbed a life-saving straw and immediately said excitedly, Lao Fu, my father is back. Mr. Fu at the door also replied, Yes, young master, please follow me there. Click. The door was opened instantly, and Zhou Xian's figure hurried out, without waiting for Mr. Fu to lead the way, and walked quickly towards the hall. Master, the master of the house is in the study. At this time, Fu reminded him. Study. Zhou Xian was a little confused, but he didn't want to think too much. He turned and walked towards the study, with Mr. Fu following behind. Soon the two came to the study. Zhou Xian was a little anxious and pushed the door open without knocking. Mr. Fu closed the door and stood guard outside. Dad, Li Hanfang, you bastard, how can you be so frizzy? You can't even knock on the door. Before Zhou Xian could finish his words, he was scolded angrily by Zhou Zonghai. He immediately turned off the fire and stood there with his head down, a little at a loss. Zhou Zonghai was a little angry when he saw his son was so incompetent, but more importantly, he was disappointed. He held his forehead, and after a while he said tiredly, Tell me, what's the matter? After hearing this, Zhou Xian dared to speak, his voice trembling slightly. Dad, Li Hanfang went to school to find me today. Has he already suspected us? There was no expression on Zhou Zonghai's face, and he said calmly. He has not offended anyone at all in recent days. Who else can he suspect except you? But he has no evidence. It is impossible for him to go to the city lord's palace to complain, and it is impossible for him to come to our house to cause trouble for you. What are you afraid of? Zhou Xian felt a little calmer after hearing this, and then he continued to ask. Dad, what should we do next? There's no way I won't take the college entrance examination, right? He was still a little uneasy, so he didn't find anything wrong with Zhou Zonghai's words. It's impossible for him to stay at home all the time. If nothing else, he has to take the college entrance examination, right? But he was afraid that Li Hanfang would target him during the college entrance examination, so he could only rely on his father. Zhou Zonghai still had a calm face when he heard this, as if he had everything in mind, and replied in a calm voice. Don't worry, I've already made arrangements. He won't cause trouble for you before the college entrance examination is over. After hearing what his father said, Zhou Xian finally breathed a sigh of relief and looked much more energetic. Then he seemed to have thought of something, looked at Zhou Zonghai and asked in confusion. Dad, why are you back so early today? Are you looking for me for something? Zhou Zonghai's eyes flickered when he heard this, and he regained his composure in an instant. He glanced at him and said, I came back just to tell you that I have arranged Li Hanfang's affairs so that you can prepare for the college entrance examination at home and don't be distracted. When Zhou Xian heard this, his heart warmed up and he almost shed tears. He was very moved and immediately said, Dad, don't worry, I am also an A-level extraordinary talent after all, I will definitely not let you down. Hearing this, Zhou Zonghai didn't say anything else. He just nodded, and then waved his hand to signal Zhou Xian to go down. Zhou Xian didn't notice anything wrong and immediately nodded and left. Zhou Zonghai looked at Zhou Xian's leaving back, his eyes flickering, and the expression on his face was indescribable. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe. Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Gao Wu, I went crazy with the animation system. Chapter 46. At this time, only Zhou Zonghai was left in the study. The majestic aura on his body was gone. He sat slumped on the chair, with an expression on his face that looked a little surprised, but more of a puzzlement. He just received a communication in the Kewu building, which made him a little panicked, because the identity of that person was definitely not something he could compare to, and he didn't know how many levels higher than him. But the other party just said something, asking him to go home and stay there before the end of the college entrance examination, and not to make any trouble. Then without saying anything else, he hung up the communication. On the way home, he had roughly guessed what happened, but he couldn't figure out how Li Hanfang, a man whose parents had both died, met a person of this level. Li Xingwu. This idea flashed through his mind, but was quickly denied by him. Although Li Xingwu's reputation was good in the entire education bureau, reputation did not equal status. Could it be that the guy from number 1 middle school is back? But it's not right, even he can't do it for the sake of the senior management of Kewu building. Did he offend someone, so someone wants to unseat him? But it's not right. The other party's statement was obviously about Li Hanfang, and it had nothing to do with whether I had offended anyone. Zhou Zonghai didn't have any clue after thinking about it, but he could only admit defeat. Now he can only blame himself for being a little reckless at the time and listening to his son's instigation to deal with Li Hanfang. Unexpectedly, there was someone behind this Li Hanfang, and his identity was so terrifying that he could actually get someone of that level to personally come forward to warn him. Zhou Zonghai knew that the other party asked him not to make trouble before the college entrance examination was over. He meant to test Li Hanfang to see how valuable he could be in the college entrance examination. If his talent was amazing, then he would be doomed. If the talent is not good enough, then it is not valuable enough, and you can live in peace and continue to be your own steward. But is this possible? Zhou Zonghai actually has no hope for his position anymore, because he is very aware of the horror of Li Hanfang's talent. He has a say on this point, and he doesn't want to deceive himself. This is useless. So now he is only thinking about how to save his life. After much thought, there is only one way, and that is, abandon the car to save the handsome man. When he thought about it, his expression became calm and his eyes became cold. Son, I have protected you for more than 10 years, it's time for you to protect me again. With Nan Nan in his heart, he closed his eyes and lay back on the chair, thinking about how to make Li Hanfang put down his hostility towards him. What Zhou Zonghai didn't know was that even if Li Hanfang did not do well in the college entrance examination, his end was already doomed, and it was even less likely that Li Hanfang would leave any trouble. At 7 o'clock in the evening, Li Hanfang arrived at the door of Cao Yumeng's house on time. Li Hanfang, who had just finished practicing in the afternoon, received a message from Cao Yumeng, saying that his parents asked him to come over for dinner. Li Hanfang thought that it had indeed been a while since he had seen her. His uncle and aunt cared so much about him, so it was necessary for him to go and see him. Besides, he also had something to see Fatty, so he arrived on time after taking a shower, carrying a large bag of various fruits in his hand. Ding dong. Li Hanfang reached out and pressed the doorbell, and clearly heard the sound of the doorbell and the slight vibration on the ground. Click. The door was opened very quickly, and a huge black shadow came directly towards Li Hanfang. This time, Li Hanfang was well prepared and stretched out a hand to press firmly against Cao Yumeng's chest. Cao Yumeng only felt that he was pressed against the beams of the room. No matter how hard he tried, his loving hug could not be sent out. At this time, Li Hanfang's lazy voice came. Okay, don't waste any effort, you're not even interested. Cao Yumeng was a little discouraged when he heard this, so he had to put down his hands and said with some frustration. Madman, why are you so strong? I'm already at level 2, but I feel like you're still unfathomable. Li Hanfang glanced at him lightly and said angrily. Okay, don't act like a little girl. I'll give you some good things later, and I'll make sure your cultivation speed doubles. Real. Cao Yumeng's eyes suddenly lit up when he heard this, and he asked with some excitement. Li Hanfeng nodded, and then said, let's go in first. Cao Yumeng nodded, and then saw the fruit in Li Hanfeng's hand. He immediately took it with a smile and said, hey, just come here, it's so expensive to bring so much fruit. As he said that, he had already entered the house first, and Li Hanfeng followed behind, with black lines all over his head. This fat man was really indebted. As soon as he entered the living room, Li Hanfeng saw Cao Dehua sitting on the sofa and Li Shuhua who was still busy in the kitchen. Uncle Cao, Aunt Li, long time no see, I'm here to catch you. After saying hello, Li Hanfeng sat directly on the sofa nearby, without any intention of treating himself as an outsider. Cao Yumeng also put the fruit on the coffee table in the living room, and then sat aside. When Cao Dehua heard Li Hanfeng's words and saw the fruits placed on the coffee table, he immediately laughed and scolded Li Hanfeng with Li Shuhua. Then Li Shuhua continued to be busy in the kitchen, while Cao Dehua chatted with Li Hanfeng. Xiao Feng, what have you been busy with lately? I asked you to come to my uncle's house for dinner, but this guy keeps saying you're not free. As he spoke, he glanced at Cao Yumeng aside. Li Hanfeng didn't want to hide it. Anyway, he was fine now. He said frankly with a nonchalant expression. Go to the Misty Forest for a month to gain experience and earn some training resources. The smile on Cao Dehua's face froze instantly, and he gradually began to become serious, and he was about to get angry. Li Hanfeng hurriedly spoke first. Uncle Cao, it's okay. I'm very strong. Besides, I'm very careful. Don't you think I'm back safely now? I've also made a lot of money. Don't worry, I won't dare to do it next time. After all, Cao Dehua's expression softened, and he looked at Li Hanfeng with a serious look on his face and said, there won't be a next time. Even if you want to go, you have to tell me. That place in the Misty Forest is not an easy place. Then he seemed to have thought of something, got up and walked back to the room, leaving Li Hanfeng and Cao Yumeng looking at each other. After a while, Cao Dehua came over holding 2 wooden boxes as big as shoe boxes, put the wooden boxes on the coffee table, looked at Li Hanfeng, touched his chin, and seemed to be sorting out his words. Xiao Feng, I forgot about this when you came over for dinner, but then I remembered that you had already gone to the Misty Forest, so I kept putting it off until now. As he spoke, he pushed the box in front of Li Hanfeng and continued. This is a little bit of your aunt and I's thoughts. Xiaomeng also has it. Don't worry, your aunt and I have prepared 2 copies. Li Hanfeng was a little confused when he heard this. He glanced at Cao Yumeng and saw that his expression was calm, so he should have known it for a long time. Uncle Cao, what is this? Open it first and take a look. Cao Dehua said nonchalantly with a smile on his face. Li Hanfeng didn't say anything more after hearing this, and raised his hand to open the wooden box. Suddenly, a strong spiritual energy hit his face, and Li Hanfeng's pupils shrank. Inside the wooden box was a spiritual stone. Judging from the full box, it is estimated to contain 50 yuan, which is worth 5 million federal coins. Li Hanfeng looked at the spiritual stones in the box with some confusion, a warm current surged in his heart, his throat felt dry, and he couldn't speak for a while. He actually knew a lot about the Cao family, and it was not a very wealthy family. Since Cao Dehua was transferred from the city guard to a civil servant, his income has dropped a lot. What he is taking out now may be the old money he saved in the past. This is it. In addition, Cao Dehua's legs and feet are now inconvenient, and Cao Yumeng happens to be in a period of rapid development. It is when he needs spiritual stones. He really did not expect that the other party would prepare a spiritual stone for him. For the Cao family, these 5 million were basically nearly half of the assets. To actually give it to an outsider, he was a little flattered and at the same time deeply moved. Uncle Cao, thank you. Li Hanfeng stood up, saluted Cao Dehua, then raised his head, grinned, and continued. But Uncle Cao, you'd better keep this and give it to Yumeng. I'm not in short supply of this. When Cao Dehua heard this, he thought Li Hanfeng was looking for an excuse to refuse, but he felt a little anxious. Xiaofeng, listen to me, Xiaomeng. Uncle Cao, listen to me, I really don't lack this. Didn't I just say that? I made some money in the misty forest and got some cultivation resources. Li Hanfang knew what Cao Dehua would say, so he spoke first. After speaking, he took out a ring and put it on the coffee table. Xiao Feng, can you? Before Cao Dehua finished speaking, he saw the ring on the coffee table clearly. His words stopped suddenly and his eyes were a little shaken. He looked deeply at Li Hanfang and asked tentatively after a while. Xiao Feng, this is. Li Hanfang nodded with a smile and said nothing. Cao Dehua was greatly shocked, and he picked up the ring on the coffee table. A trace of spiritual energy poured into his body, and his pupils suddenly shrank. Because he discovered that this was really a space ring, and there were 200 spiritual stones in it. Cao Dehua looked at Li Hanfang with a somewhat surprised look, as if he was a little confused as to what Li Hanfang had done in the misty forest. He was able to obtain so many spiritual stones and a space ring. Phew. Cao Dehua took a long breath, and then said with some relief. It seems that your aunt and I have underestimated you. Now that you have such ability, your parents, your aunt and I can rest assured. You are nothing like this brat in my family. Alas. Cao Yumeng on the side immediately made a bitter look on his face when he heard this. Can this also be blamed on me? Li Hanfang grinned and said. Haha, but Uncle Cao, since you have given me the spiritual stone, I am embarrassed not to accept it, otherwise it will appear that I don't know how to appreciate you, right? With that said, Li Hanfang took the space ring from Cao Dehua, put a box of spiritual stones on the coffee table into the ring, and then handed the ring to Cao Yumeng. Cao Yumeng was in a daze and looked at Li Hanfang at a loss. This was too precious and he didn't dare to accept it. When Cao Dehua saw this scene, he quickly stopped him and said. Xiao Feng, you can't do this. You risked your life to get this back. How can you give it to this brat? Yeah, madman, I really can't have this. Just put it away. Don't worry, Dad also prepared spiritual stones for me. Li Hanfang looked at the expressions of the two people and said with some laughter and tears. Don't worry, I still have quite a few, including the space ring. I originally prepared this for Fatty, so don't worry and accept it. The Cao family's father and son looked at each other. When Cao's father saw that Li Hanfang's expression didn't seem to be fake, he was immediately amazed. It seems that Zhao Feng is really promising. I'm afraid he is now strong enough to be admitted to a prestigious school. Then he nodded to Cao Yumeng and signaled to accept the ring. He knew that since Li Hanfang had prepared all these, he couldn't shirk it, so he had no choice but to accept it. Cao Yumeng nodded when he saw his father. After thinking about it, he put away the ring and said with some emotion. Thank you, madman. Don't worry, I won't embarrass you during the college entrance examination. Li Hanfang smiled and said angrily. Okay, thank you for nothing. Practice hard and try to get into a famous school. Cao Yumeng nodded heavily. A few people chatted about trivial matters, and soon Li Shuhua called everyone over to eat. The three of them didn't waste any time. After washing their hands, they took their seats. Several people were chatting while eating a table of sumptuous dishes. When Li Shuhua learned what had just happened, he also praised Li Hanfang with a look of relief, which made him feel a little embarrassed. After all, the praises of his elders are always praised. It's gratifying. When Li Hanfang returned home, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. Li Hanfang looked at the clock on the wall, and then walked straight back to the room. At this time, the two shadow clones in the room were still practicing with their eyes closed. After Li Hanfang entered the door, he looked at the consumption of spiritual stones on the ground and nodded. It was almost as he expected. Then he formed a Ren seal with his hands. Untie. Pung pung. The two shadow clones immediately turned into white smoke and dissipated. At the same time, Li Hanfang felt a surge of fatigue, which made him sigh at the power of the prince, who could actually cultivate thousands of clones. Li Hanfang lay on the bed and began to plan his training plan for the next 10 days. First of all, the two shadow clones practiced for 8 hours a day and consumed 800 spirit stones in 10 days. He still has more than 800 spirit stones, which is enough. But it's not enough to immerse yourself in training all the time. The body cannot perfectly control the new aura, so it needs to fight to adapt. This requires the main body to personally go out. It is too troublesome to go to and from the foggy forest, so the only choice is 2 hours of virtual battlefield training every day. Going to Kewu building is a good time to test out what's going on with Zhou Zonghai and see if he'll cause trouble for me. Finally, it was time to practice complete concentration, Changjiang, at night. He had been practicing complete concentration, Changjiang, for a while, but since there was no one to supervise him, he had no way of knowing what he would be like after he fell asleep. But now that he has the shadow clone technique, all problems are solved. He must fully control full concentration Changjiang, which will greatly improve his body function and cultivation speed. Thinking of this, Li Hanfeng has decided to follow this process in the next 10 days. According to his estimation, there should be no problem in breaking through to the 4th level of transcendence before the college entrance examination. Li Hanfeng's eyes flashed with cold light, and then he slowly closed his eyes and fell asleep. Leave everything to be dealt with after the college entrance examination. Time flies by so fast, especially when you are not focused on practicing. Every day is so fulfilling that it is difficult to notice the passage of time. Today is June 15th, the day when the college entrance examination begins in the entire Dragon Kingdom. The college entrance examination is divided into 2 parts, one is the martial arts test and the other is the science test. After the martial arts test is over, the science test comes. SH Base City, Chaofan No. 1 Middle School Plaza. At this time, the whole school's martial arts examination candidates have gathered here, and the teaching director Zhang Yuanfeng on the stage is reading out the contents of this martial arts examination with a serious face. Although the purpose of the college entrance examination is the same every year, the specific methods are different. Therefore, at the mobilization meeting of teachers and students before the college entrance examination every year, the dean will read out the content of the college entrance examination. Zhang Yuanfeng's serious voice on the stage rang in the ears of teachers and students. Today is the day for us to test the results of our cultivation, and it is also the beginning of everyone's future defense of our country. As the motivating opening remarks of about 10 minutes passed, under the excited eyes of the students in the audience, Zhang Yuanfeng pondered for a long time and then continued in a very serious voice. This year's martial arts exam will last for a total of 3 days. The special invigilator of the Education Bureau will lead everyone into a secret assessment environment. You will stay there for 3 days. We will distribute a smart watch band to everyone later. This watch band can record the number and level of monsters you have hunted, and then convert them into points according to a certain ratio. At the same time, you can call for help in case of danger. However, if you choose to call for help, the results of this martial arts test will be cancelled. I must remind all candidates that although there will be a special rescue team, there will be a certain mortality rate in the martial arts exam every year. So everyone must act according to their ability. Only with destiny, everything is possible in the future. After the words fell, Zhang Yuanfeng waved his hand, and then the head teachers of each class began to distribute smart watch bands to the candidates in their respective classes. At the same time, there was a burst of discussion in the audience. Although I know that there is a certain mortality rate in the martial arts exam every year, when I have to go through it, my hands and feet are still a little cold. That's right, it seems we can only hold on tight. After all, the director is right, everything is possible only if fate is at hand. Yes, but this year I am going to a secret realm. It seems that the mortality rate this time may be higher than in previous years. Even Li Hanfeng was surprised when he heard that this year's assessment was going to enter the secret realm. He was surprised and a little confused at the same time. The so-called secret realm is the space node left behind when the aliens invade. This space node will serve as a transit station to facilitate the aliens' entry into Blue Star. And when this space node is opened by humans, it will be made into a secret realm for future generations to experience. A large number of monsters will be put into the secret realm for assessment, and some alien races may be deliberately retained in it. This danger level was much higher than in previous years, so Li Hanfeng was a little confused. Is it possible that there are new changes in the current situation? So we need to use more radical methods to screen out more talented students. Li Hanfeng made some guesses in his mind, but he had no access to this level of information now, so he could only give up and prepare for the next assessment. At this time, Cao Yumeng on the side couldn't help but speak. Crazy man, you actually want to enter the secret realm this time. It seems that this year will be very dangerous. Cao Yumeng was obviously a little nervous, and his hands clenched into fists when he spoke. Fat man, you should have broken through the 3rd level now, right? Just be steady. With your strength, there will be no problem. Li Hanfeng patted Cao Yumeng's shoulder and comforted him, without saying anything else. After all, he still had to experience this kind of thing by himself. No amount of words from outsiders could give him a sufficient sense of security. Cao Yumeng nodded when he heard this and said no more, but his expression softened slightly. At this time, Lao Ban came over, and after giving each of them a smart watch band, he said solemnly, "You two have an S-level and an A-level talent. I hope you can argue with each other, but remember, life always comes first. Don't show off." After hearing this, Cao Yumeng nodded solemnly and spoke. "I know Lao Ban, I will be careful," Li Hanfeng said lazily. "Okay, Lao Ban, don't worry, you still don't know me." Lao Ban raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "Don't look lazy. Just because I know you, I want to remind you not to be careless." Li Hanfeng was at a loss for words. He felt that his boss might have misunderstood him. He was about to explain a few words. Lao Ban has already walked away and continues to distribute smart watch straps. Li Hanfeng glanced at Cao Yumeng, who was holding back a smile, and ignored it. Instead, he picked up the smart watch band and put it on his left wrist. Suddenly his basic information began to flash on the watch strap. Extraordinary number 1, Li Hanfeng, a 4th-level extraordinary person with S-level enhanced extraordinary talent. The information crossed over and quickly turned into another template. Name, Li Hanfeng. Score, 0. The message was very simple, but Li Hanfeng narrowed his eyes slightly. His talent and level should have been sent to the terminal just now. This strap is not simple. Li Hanfeng looked at a red dot on it. This should be the call for help button. Then this strap should also have a positioning function, otherwise the rescuers would not be able to know the location of each student. Also, my grade information should have been known to the Education Bureau and the admissions teachers of each college, right? Li Hanfeng thought about it and didn't care about it. This was just basic information. Level does not equal combat power. Cao Yumeng on the side was playing with the watch strap on his hand with a surprised look on his face. Li Hanfeng glanced at him and ignored him. His eyes began to look around, as if looking for something. At this time, the smart watch bands for each class had basically been distributed. As the teachers began to walk out of the group of students, Li Hanfeng's eyes stayed on a beautiful figure with a cold temperament and long hair like a waterfall. As if feeling the difference in Li Hanfeng's gaze, the beautiful figure turned around, revealing an oval face with a peerless appearance, and her beautiful eyes met Li Hanfeng's gaze. Li Hanfeng saw her looking over, grinned, and nodded slightly, which was considered a greeting. When Murong Qingying saw that it was Li Hanfeng, she nodded slightly with an expressionless face, and then turned around. Still so cold. What a difficult girl to get along with. Li Hanfeng sighed secretly, but he didn't know that this scene had been seen by many people. After all, beautiful things always attract people's attention, and suddenly there was another burst of discussion. "I'll go, what did I see?" Murong, the school beauty, actually nodded with that Li Hanfeng. Really or not, Murong, the school beauty, has never looked at anyone in the eye, and she actually nodded to Li Hanfeng. "It's true, I saw it too, they won't." Li Hanfeng didn't pay attention to these comments, but continued to turn his eyes. Soon Li Hanfeng's eyes were locked on a person, and this person was also looking at Li Hanfeng. Seeing Li Hanfeng's gaze, he turned his head hastily, not daring to look at her. "This person is Zhou Xian." Li Hanfeng looked at the other party's guilty expression, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "I gave you a chance. At this time, all the smart watch straps have been distributed." Zhang Yuanfeng on the stage glanced at the time, then his spiritual energy surged, and he lightly scolded. "Quiet." A slightly majestic voice echoed throughout the square, and suddenly the conversation in the square disappeared and became quiet. "The special invigilator will open a space passage into the secret realm here later. Now I want to ask you again." After a pause, Zhang Yuanfeng's serious voice sounded again. "Are you ready?" "Ready at all the time." The candidates in the audience answered in unison, their voices passionate and full of youthful vitality. Zhang Yuanfang looked at the passionate candidates below and nodded with satisfaction. I announce that this martial arts examination has officially begun. After Zhang Yuanfang finished speaking, he nodded to a middle-aged man behind him, and then stepped aside. The middle-aged man took 2 steps forward, looked around at the candidates, and said directly, "I am the invigilator sent by the Education Bureau. Next, I will open the secret passage, and then ask each class teacher to lead the candidates in each class to enter in an orderly manner." After saying this, the middle-aged special correspondent turned his hand, and an egg-sized bead appeared in his hand. It looked crystal clear, but he did not feel any aura fluctuations. Suddenly, he held it hard in his hand, and the bead suddenly emitted a dazzling light, and an extremely terrifying aura emanated from it. In just a moment, the aura disappeared again, as if everything was an illusion. However, at this moment, the candidates below, including many teachers, were already dripping with cold sweat, and their expressions were a little frightened. What a terrifying aura! What level of power is it? Li Hanfeng also had a solemn look on his face. He didn't know what level of power this was, but he was certain that this was definitely not a level that high-level extraordinary beings could achieve. At this time, the bead in the hand of the special correspondent continued to emit a dazzling light for half a quarter of an hour. The light faded and the bead disappeared. Instead, a 3-meter-high light curtain appeared in the field. As the rays of light circulated, it was vaguely visible that there seemed to be ripples of space around the light curtain. The commissioner looked at the screen of light for a long time. After confirming that there was no problem, he turned to face the candidates and said in a solemn voice, "Now start entering in an orderly manner. Everyone's position inside will be random." At this point, he paused, and then reminded him very seriously, "If you encounter a barrier nearby after entering the secret realm, just change the direction to explore and don't try to destroy the barrier." After saying that, he stepped aside and stood near the light curtain, waiting for all the candidates to enter. The class teachers below began to organize the students to walk up to the stage in an orderly manner. According to the class order, the candidates in the first class went in first, and so on, all the way to the back. Li Hanfeng, on the other hand, was thinking about the meaning of the commissioner's words as he walked. What kind of barrier? What is it used for? Is it a barrier blocking some powerful alien race? Li Hanfeng then denied this conjecture. If it was a barrier that even powerful aliens could not break, there was no need to remind the students. But what it was, Li Hanfeng couldn't figure out, so he could only go and take a look first. Soon, all the candidates in class one after another entered the light curtain, and Li Hanfeng and Cao Yumeng were always at the back of the class. At this time, Cao Yumeng turned back to Li Hanfeng and said, "Madman, I'm on first, come on." Li Hanfeng smiled and said, "Come on, go, stay safe." Cao Yumeng nodded heavily, then took steps. His burly figure was submerged in the light curtain, and disappeared silently from the scene. When Li Hanfeng saw that Cao Yumeng's figure had disappeared, he took a deep breath, clenched his fists, and felt the state of his body. This was his habit. Then he slowly walked into the light curtain, and soon his figure was submerged in the light curtain. Li Hanfeng only felt that his consciousness was blurred for a moment, and when he opened his eyes again, he was already in a strange environment. His body sank instantly, his eyes turned scarlet, and he kept scanning the surrounding environment. He had to confirm the safety of the surroundings first, but there was no monster squatting nearby. If he didn't pay attention, something would happen. After Li Hanfeng glanced around for a few times, his expression suddenly became dull for a moment, and then a touch of excitement appeared on his face. Ding! Task release. Became the top scorer in the National Martial Arts Examination. Reward kill value. 10,000, an anime weapon of your choice. Li Hanfeng suddenly remembered the system's mission reminder sound, which made him extremely excited. You must know that this mission panel has been silent since the release of a novice mission. Now that a mission was suddenly released, and the reward was so generous, how could he not be excited? He quickly began to calm down and lowered his eyebrows to think. Why is this mission suddenly released? Is it because some event must be encountered to trigger the mission, or is it something else? He was very distressed because his system could not communicate at all, and there were no very detailed prompts. There were only some basic function introductions, and he had to explore everything by himself. But he quickly shook off these thoughts. Sooner or later he would understand the system clearly. There was no rush. The most important thing now was to get the top spot in the martial arts exam. He had to win the title of number 1 pick. This was his goal. He never thought about pretending to be a pig and eating the tiger, because after being a pig for a long time, it is easy to really think of yourself as a pig. Not to mention that now there is another reason to go all out. After all, he didn't want to miss this reward. Li Hanfeng put away his thoughts and began to look at the surrounding environment. He just used his Sharingan to see if there were any monsters or aliens nearby, and did not observe the geographical environment. Looking around, Li Hanfeng found that he was at the junction of a forest and a ruin. His surroundings were open and there were only some overgrown weeds. But behind him was a seemingly huge forest, about a kilometer away from him, and near the forest were vaguely visible building ruins. He is in the open space between the two. Li Hanfeng was about to leave here immediately. The view here was too wide and he could easily be noticed by other things. He wanted to be a hunter and didn't want to be targeted by anything. But he soon fell into a dilemma. Should he go to the ruins or the forest? First of all, he has experience in forest hunting. For him, the forest is naturally a good choice. However, foreigners shouldn't live in the forest, right? He didn't know, but he wanted to fight against foreigners. He had never fought against foreigners in a real sense, not counting the virtual battlefield. Various thoughts flashed through Li Hanfeng's mind, and he quickly made a decision. Enter the forest. His current goal is to be number 1, and everything else must fall back. The forest is a gathering place for monsters, so he can definitely find the hunting target quickly, and he also has experience in this area. There are only 3 days, and it is not cost-effective to spend too much time looking for prey. With the decision made, Li Hanfeng immediately mobilized the spiritual energy in his body, and in a flash, he turned into a bolt of lightning and flew towards the forest. Li Hanfeng's spiritual energy moved, as if triggering some switch. The watch strap on his left wrist vibrated slightly, and then something similar to a button fell down from the bottom of the watch strap. Then the little button opened a pair of small wings and flew up, following Li Hanfeng like a fly, but this thing didn't make an annoying buzzing sound. Li Hanfeng was shocked. Is this a tracking device? There won't be a live broadcast outside, right? Was this how you played the martial arts exams in previous years? Li Hanfeng opened his Sharingan and looked at the fly-like thing behind him, and found that it was actually a tracking device, because he saw 2 red dots lighting up on it, which were small and looked like fly eyes. Without the Sharingan, he really couldn't see clearly at this distance, but with the Sharingan, let alone the eyes, he could even see clearly the vibration frequency of its wings. Moreover, Li Hanfeng also discovered that this thing had his own spiritual energy flowing on it. It seemed that it followed him around based on the fluctuations of this spiritual energy. Li Hanfeng shook his head and smiled bitterly. The people in the Education Bureau were really good at playing. The martial arts test is not just about scores. Does this depend on specific performance? Li Hanfeng simply refused to look at the thing and kept walking toward the forest. He had no choice but to look at it. It was something made by the Education Bureau. It was obviously used to observe the candidates. He couldn't just chop it with a knife, right? If this knife goes down, will he still want the number 1 pick? Have you finished this task yet? So he simply pretended that he didn't see it. The first priority was to quickly kill a monster to find out what the fraction conversion ratio was. At this time, in a conference room of number 1 middle school. All the head teachers of the 3rd grade of high school are gathered here, including Zhang Yuanfang and Li Xingwu, as well as the special invigilator. Next to Li Xingwu sat a middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s. This man was dressed in casual clothes and did not exude any aura. But as long as your eyes stay on him, you will feel an unspeakable aura enveloping him, and his brows are filled with murderous aura. This person is the principal of number 1 middle school, Ozan. At this time, everyone is looking at a huge projection light screen in front of them. The light screen can project 10 images at a time. According to the scores, the top 10 people with the highest scores will appear on the projection. At this time, everyone was staring at Li Hanfeng's back rushing towards the forest. Because they had just entered the secret realm, there were less than 10 people who had successfully hunted the monsters. Therefore, according to the level of projection, Li Hanfeng was naturally among them. The special invigilator looked at Zhang Yuanfang standing aside with some doubts, and asked tentatively. Director Zhang, this Li Hanfang's information shows that he is an S-level enhanced system, but those eyes just now were. He was a little surprised. When those scarlet pupils looked over at him just now, they actually gave him an extremely evil feeling, as if they were being targeted by some terrifying existence. This made him very frightened. You know, Li Hanfang was very different from him in level, but Li Hanfang could give him such oppression just by looking at him through the light screen. It was simply unbelievable. Zhang Yuanfang was also very confused. Hearing the words of the special invigilator, he didn't know how to answer for a while. Li Xingwu on the side said, Commissioner Wu, we actually don't know this very well, but when he awakened, he was indeed an S-level enhanced system. Maybe he had strengthened his eyes. I'm afraid only he knows this. After a pause, Li Xingwu smiled again and said, if he is strong enough, then sooner or later we will see what he is capable of. Commissioner Wu heard this and thought to himself, as long as Li Hanfang is strong enough, they will see him take action sooner or later. If he is not strong enough, there is no need to care. He then nodded and said no more. The conversation between the two was heard by all the teachers. Everyone had different expressions, but most of them were a little surprised. Naturally, they all saw those eyes just now and felt an extremely evil aura, so they were also paying attention to Li Hanfang. Even the principal of No. 1 middle school, who had never seen the beginning or end, also kept his eyes on Li Hanfang. Naturally, Li Hanfang didn't know, because he looked back at the fly, which left a deep impression on the teachers. At this time, Li Hanfang had already entered the forest, and while continuing to move deeper, he looked around, trying to find any signs of monster activity. According to his guess, the assessment only lasted for 3 days, and the teacher who set the questions would not let the candidates spend all their time looking for prey, so the distribution of monsters or alien races must be carefully considered. Either there are a lot of them and they are densely distributed so that candidates can encounter them quickly, or there are certain instructions to remind candidates that monsters or aliens are in a certain area. So he has slowed down and will look around to see if there are any traces while going deep into the forest. Sure enough, after Li Hanfang continued to dig deep for about a quarter of an hour, he found the body of the monster on the ground. Li Hanfang paused and came to the corpse to observe. The flesh and blood in many places of the corpse had been eaten away, exposing the white bones. The second-level saber-toothed pig seems to have been dead for more than 3 hours. Its blood has been sucked dry by other creatures. No wonder it doesn't smell the blood. Li Hanfang looked carefully and found that the body was badly mutilated. He was not a professional and could not tell what kind of monster killed the saber-toothed pig. But he observed the traces left by the monster when it left. He was very experienced in this area. After all, he had stayed in the misty forest for a month. Li Hanfang pondered for a long time, and then directly followed the traces left on the ground to trace the past. With his current strength, no matter what kind of monster it was, as long as it was not a high-level monster, he had nothing to fear. He followed the traces left on the ground and arrived in front of a cave in less than 2/4 of an hour. He leaned behind a tree and looked around the entrance of the cave, trying to determine whether there was a monster inside. It was there are still more monsters. He soon judged from the traces on the ground that the monsters had indeed entered the cave, but if there were several of them, he would have to go in and take a look to find out. He slowed down his breathing, lowered his steps, and slowly touched the entrance of the cave. A pair of scarlet pupils looked inside. He needed to judge the size of the cave so that he would not be unable to use it when he took action. After Li Hanfang saw the situation in the cave clearly, he walked slowly into the cave. The cave was still relatively open, which would not affect his drawing of the sword, and he had already discovered that there was only one monster inside. Level 3 Crackclaw Bear. The Crackclaw Bear, who was dozing at this time, had already heard the noise. He instantly opened a pair of beast eyes, and a ferocious aura rushed towards his face. Li Hanfang looked calmly at the Splitclaw Bear, who was on all fours and ready to attack at any time, and didn't pay much attention. As he is already at the 4th level, he cares more about the score of the 3rd-level monster beast than the 3rd-level Splitclaw Bear itself. Without any nonsense, Li Hanfang turned his palm, and the Tang Dao appeared in his hand. He held the handle of the knife directly with his right hand. His breathing rhythm began to change, and wisps of white mist began to flow from his mouth. Roar! The split-claw bear roared, its limbs crushed the ground, and its huge figure rushed directly towards Li Hanfang. Breath of thunder type of 1 thunderbolt flash. In an instant, lightning appeared, and a golden lightning flashed in the field, and a huge head was thrown into the air. Split-claw bear, dead. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe.